He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, big Marlow Show today, a format we've done once before. So I filled in for my good friend Charlie Kirk today on his monster podcast that he does with my colleagues at Salem. And so that'll be most of the show today. And then we talked to May Mailman, who's a Harvard-educated lawyer from the White House working under Stephen Miller over there to break down the executive order on Harvard. It's a very Harvard-centric show. Mike Benz is here. Mike Benz, amazing guy. So you'll hear from him. I've been meaning to sit down with Benz, and then he kept getting on, Rogan Show and stuff like that. He keeps having to travel around. But he is absolutely fascinating, as you guys all know. If you've heard my show, you've heard Mike, and he's one of the big fighters for information freedom and against the deep state on Earth currently. So we'll talk to him. So a lot to do. There is a fair bit of news I'm not going to get to that I would love to get to when I'm not as jammed up, but just I always recommend Breitbart.com. Our Fight Club interview today is with Peter Schweitzer. I get his take on the Bidens. I get his take on Harvard. It's a really, really good stuff. But we got some great economic news, really interesting stuff that Trump is going to tariff Apple. It can't just be Apple. It's probably going to be Apple, Samsung, whoever's making phones, whatever the product is, because he wants Apple to reshore back to America, which I find to be sort of unbelievable that he's doing that. I was very excited. You heard me say it on the show, just to get Apple to uncouple from China. I thought was a big deal. But he doesn't want him building in India. He doesn't want him in Brazil. He wants him in the United States of America, and he's going to tariff them if they're not there. And that is more aggressive than I thought he would be, but I think it's really exciting, and I think maybe it'll work. It's, of course, an opening negotiation tactic, so we'll see. Speaking of, he's announced new EU tariffs. The market did not freak out about it, so the market did not tank when he announced that. EU are not necessarily good actors here. They don't, I think, always have our best interest at heart. And I think that Trump being aggressive with them, I think, is great. And they tend to, collectively bargain as a group. And it gives them an unfair advantage in a lot of ways. I see Trump seeing that as something that he's not happy about. So him suggesting he's going to put new tariffs, 50% on the difficult to deal with European Union. Obviously, this is an opening bid, an opening first step in a negotiation. So we'll see more here, but we'll more breakdown for you Breitbart News. But I like the aggression. I think he's right to say they're difficult. They've intentionally made themselves difficult to deal with by being a collectivist entity, and the market not freaking out, understanding that Trump is negotiating and Trump seems to be getting his way a lot is just fantastic. It's just unbelievable to watch. So all that and more at Breitbart News and throughout the day. But this is going to be a good show. I'm looking forward to getting your feedback also. Aloha at alexmarlow.com. Oh, I was on Laura Ingraham yesterday. I was told I was cooking. So I've got that linked up on my Twitter at Alex Marlow. On that, I break down how much Kamala knew about Joe Biden's quote unquote mental decline and what culpability she has. Spoiler alert, my main take is when Congressman Comer said he was going to haul her in and others, start with her. She should be the first one. Bring her in, get her under questioning. Why not? Let's figure out what they got. But it will be ultimately on Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is going to be the one. If anyone's going to get locked up, charge can be pressed. Congress can question, can bring the evidence out, but it's got to be the Department of Justice that pushes this. So we're going to have to keep the pressure on the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. I got faith that she'll carry out something good here, but we got to keep the pressure on in that regard. So that full clip for you at my X account on Breitbart.com, et cetera. If you want that, that's it. Thanks to Misty for putting the show together, but Marlow hosting for Charlie Kirk, starting with Harvard and Mike Benz, and then May Mailman from the White House breaking down the Harvard executive order. That's good stuff. Have a great Memorial Day. In case we don't talk, aloha at alexmarlow.com. And here's Marlow on the Kirk Show. The media is broken. For decades, big cable and legacy media have filtered information to hide the truth. But thanks to podcasts and new media like this show, the truth can break through, providing voices and views the legacy outlets block from the air. But big cable still has one major way to control information, and that's access. They do this by limiting access to something called spectrum, the invisible airwaves that power affordable wireless internet, and by forcing you into their bundles, keeping independent media out of reach. Trump and Republicans in Congress have a chance to do something big here by making more spectrum available and breaking big cable's stranglehold on information. So there's a couple things you could do to find out more. You can go to endthecableopoly.org. That's endthecableopoly.org for more information about how to make more spectrum available. And if you're convinced, you should call your senators and your members of Congress and say, hey, why don't you work with President Trump and try to make more spectrum available? So endthecableopoly.org to find more. Welcome to the Charlie Kirk Show. My name's Alex Marlow. I'm the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and the host of the Alex Marlow Show on the Salem Podcast Network. And I'm always excited when I get the opportunity to fill in for my friend Charlie. Those of you who don't know our history together, Charlie sent us an idea for a story way back when he was a young whippersnapper in high school. And we gave him the revolutionary idea. Why don't you write it up yourself? He did. It went viral online. He got on Fox. He got all over talk radio. And he got the bug to become a part of the conservative movement. And he's been one of our fearless leaders ever since. And it's always an honor and a privilege when I get to fill in for him, especially when it's a busy news day. And there is a ton to get to, but I want to start with the big one. The big one is Harvard. Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security, Donald Trump's administration blocking Harvard from enrolling foreign students. Harvard has already started informing students that you are going to have to find a new school. We've got some audio of the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. Let's play cut 392, please.
You say it is a privilege, not a right, for American schools to be able to host foreigners on their campus.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this program has been in place for a very long time. These policies have been in place for a long time, and Harvard brought these consequences upon themselves. They have promoted and allowed violent activity on campus. They have allowed anti-Semitism, participation with CCP and Chinese infiltration and influence on their campus, and they haven't protected their students.
This is, of course, 100% accurate. We know this about Harvard, that they are the least free speech campus, according to FIRE, on and throughout the United States of America. They discriminate against Asians and Jews, among others. They allow for hate speech on campus routinely, and which, again, it's the sort of thing, we're free speech side on the right, but the left told us you're not allowed to do these things. And they work extensively with China, including trying to cut corners in order to protect people within the CCP. And what Trump has done here, which is really interesting, is he's called out China specifically, the Chinese government. At Breitbart News, we always wake up every morning and we read all the Chinese state media. It's the first thing we do. We don't go straight to the New York Times or Breitbart. We go straight to the source. We go straight to Chinese state media. They're furious about this. They're already complaining about it, and that's a good thing. We get a little more from the Homeland Security Secretary. Let's play cut 393.
Harvard's freshman class this year are foreign. They're foreigners here on student visas. What happens? Where do they go now? What do they do?
So 27% of their students are foreign students, and they will have to find some other university to go to. And hopefully they find one that cares about them and provides a safe environment.
Exactly. They're going to have to find a new place to go. And because this is a national security issue, and the first question that comes to mind, is Donald Trump actually allowed to do this? And the bottom line is he is. It is allowed. The president has broad control over immigration status. The executive branch does. It's virtually unchallenged authority when it comes to visas. So all it takes is for Secretary of State Marco Rubio to say we're canceling them, and that's it. But what Trump is announcing they're going to do is you cannot stay here. And this is all about cracking down on the DEI, the wokeness, the discrimination, the lack of free speech, but in particular China. And I want to bring this point up because this is so emphatic. I think so much of what Trump has done in the beginning of his administration has been about targeting China, be it the tariffs, be it trying to broker peace and new deals around the world, trying to reshore American manufacturing. A lot of this has to do with countering China. Take Greenland. Charlie went over to Greenland. And why do we want Greenland? Because China is encroaching into the Arctic, and we want to be able to counter them with a bigger military presence and defense security presence there. He is trying to keep China out of America's backyard, and he's actually called it out in this instance. Many of you might not know this, but Xi Jinping's daughter went to Harvard. She went about 10 years ago, and Harvard protected her by allowing her to attend with a pseudonym. So she was getting the Harvard education that we created, an American institution, quintessential, and it was hidden from the public that the leader of our biggest geopolitical rivals was getting educated there. That is outrageous in and of itself, and yet it was never discussed. It's completely new to most people today. Maybe you're hearing it on this show for the first time. Maybe you're hearing it on another show that you like. But today is the day where a lot of people are going to realize, hey, wait a minute. Why are we Americans with $9 billion in taxpayer funds headed towards Harvard this year? Why are we supporting this type of behavior? It doesn't make any sense. You're not supposed to be a foreign student who's a foreign adversary to come to America, learn how we do things, and be able to return to your country to be able to take advantage of our brain power, our resources, and then to educate people on how to defeat America on the world stage. That's exactly what Harvard's been a part of for a long time, but not always. And this is an incredibly important point. Harvard was not always like this. Harvard was created specifically by Americans because we did not want to have the next generations of elite only come from Oxford and Cambridge. This is a crucial point, and the media does not get this. This is Jeffrey Toobin on CNN with Anderson Cooper. Play cut 398, guys.
Why don't we go to some other school where there's less controversy, or go to another country? I mean, that's what's really going on here. It's going on with tourists. It's going on with students. They are worried about how foreigners are treated in the United States. So why not go to college at Oxford instead of Harvard? And that's a big loss to this country.
Yeah, this is the exact wrong idea. This is the opposite of what's going on. What's going on is that Harvard was created to educate Americans to compete with the rest of the world. It was not created to educate foreigners to go back to their countries and beat America. How do we get this way? It's wokeness, it's leftism, it's money. It's following the money. What's gone on here is that not all Americans can afford Harvard. How much does Harvard cost, guys? I don't even know. It's going to be close to $100,000 a year at this point. Not all Americans can afford that stuff. Do you know who can pay? Oligarchs, elites, aristocrats from around the world. They come in, they don't even just pay full freight tuition. They'll come in and they'll make donations, and they will come in specifically to get those dollars. I know this. I have inside sources inside of the Harvard fundraising apparatus, and they specifically court foreign donors to try to get money. If you are an American student and you're trying to compete, just note that you have to be better than foreigners who want to come in and get those visas from Harvard to make money. Of course, this is outrageous, and it's never discussed, and it takes a bold leader like Donald Trump to finally say, we're no longer going to do this. Harvard was fractionally foreign students 40 years ago. I think it was about 20% foreign students. I think it was about 20 years ago, the last math I did. Now we're talking 7,000 international students at Harvard. It's all ridiculous. I'm not saying we don't want to get a handful of people. We don't want that option of the best and the brightest, of people who intend to stay in America, to become an elite in America, and to help America. But that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing literally Xi Jinping's daughter coming in. But it gets even better than that. Another thing that Trump is doing is he's continuing to take the wood to Democrats. Who is the chair of Harvard's board? Who's the head of their board? You guys know this? Penny Pritzker, an Obama administration alum and the sister of J.B. Pritzker, who is going to run for president in 2028. These are the wokest of the woke. And so this is the Obama apparatus that Trump is running into right now. He's doing this on purpose. The Harvard board, led by a Obama appointee and sister of the governor of Illinois, who's going to run for president, who has stuck it out even through all the Claudine Gay stuff, where she was busted plagiarizing. They put a total fraud as president. Pritzker is a Nepo baby. She inherited all of her money and power because her family is heir to the Hyatt fortune. That's how she got powerful. That's why she's in charge of the Harvard board. And the Harvard board, think of it as a part of the Democrat Party apparatus. We are taking on China. We're taking on the Democrat apparatus. We are resetting things in a meaningful way. There is no reason why you, the taxpayer, should be funding Harvard to the tune of $9 billion, especially with their $50 billion endowment, and especially when they don't go by basic American rights, such as freedom of speech. We can no longer keep giving our intellectual property to the Chinese for whatever pittance it costs their oligarchs to pay the Harvard board to get their kids in. This is a brilliant idea from President Trump, and legally speaking, I think these challenges are going to absolutely fail. Trump is going to win this one, and the Democrats once again are going to be supporting a wildly unpopular idea. The American people want Harvard cracked down upon. We have disdain for our elites right now. Trump understands that, and he's going for it. Really happy to be in here for Charlie. I specifically asked the guys to pull me a great clip of Charlie at Cambridge. I love when Charlie goes to these campuses, and going to Cambridge, where I actually did a summer school in Cambridge when I was 15 or so, and it was very influential on me. And it was Charlie showed up, and let's see how it went. Can we play cut 312, guys?
So you've condemned the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as a huge mistake.
Correct.
Why do you believe it was a mistake to pass anti-discrimination legislation? And what do you think would be better policy for being treated fairly and equally, which you see as an American principle?
Yeah, nothing against the intent, but it was too broadly written and it played into something called disparate impact. Disparate impact was woven within the Civil Rights Act, and disparate impact basically says if two racial groups have different outcomes, the answer must be racism. It does not allow any legal nuance. So there are four components to, quote unquote, the anti-racist regime of America. I don't pretend to know what goes on in this country. I could just talk about America. I'm sure that's fine. And it's four components: affirmative action, critical race theory, DEI, and disparate impact. Those are the kind of the four components. All of them have their subsection. The Civil Rights Act led the way to affirmative action, which is weaponized, quote unquote, reverse racism against Asian and white people. And the Civil Rights Act also blazed the trail for disparate impact as a legal theory, basically saying that if black Americans are doing worse in a group, it might not be because of marital differences or cultural differences or single motherhood issues. It must be racism. And so because of that, the Civil Rights Act was too broadly written. So the intent, it should have been a single page or a two-page bill to say that you cannot discriminate against based on the color of somebody's skin, period, end of story. Instead, we get a multiple 100-page bill with lots of chapters and lots of lesser-known amendments that created basically a permanent anti-racist bureaucracy within our federal government to go find racism where it doesn't exist and create it new places where otherwise did not exist.
It's fantastic. And I love how Charlie always got an explanation. They think just bringing something up that you said is a dunk. He's like, no, I've thought about this really hard and you haven't. So you probably should have been more prepared when you ask. And it's great. It's a great explanation. And it's also really interesting to see right now in Trump's America how the whole concept of intersectionality is going to die. The various interest groups are not in line anymore. We're seeing massive shifts in younger voters, in Hispanic voters, in demographics. We never thought as a conservative movement we were going to make this level of progress as quickly. We're bringing all these sorts of people in, and this could be the end of intersectionality as we know it. It could be the beginning of the end, because when these groups don't all work as a block, Democrats can't move them. They can't move individuals because their ideas aren't compelling enough. They only move blocks of voters. So if we can somehow chisel off a few of those blocks, which is what we're doing, then I feel like the future is going to be very bright. It's going to have a lot of conservatism in it. Great stuff from Charlie. Great arguments as usual. And I love to see it. So always a blast. All right. One other thing where Trump and team are trying to shake things up is with MAHA. There's a big MAHA meeting yesterday with some big announcements. We got some clips of this too. Let's play cut 386, please, guys.
Here are just some of the alarming findings, and they really are alarming. It's unbelievable, terrible. More than 40% of American children now have at least one chronic health condition. Since the 1970, rates of childhood cancer have soared in many cases by nearly 50%, 50%. Well, in the 1960s, less than 5% of the children were obese. Now over 20% are obese. Just a few decades ago, 1 in 10,000 children had autism. Today, it's 1 in 31.
It is a striking thing in this country how we've gotten so much less healthy. We've gotten less healthy mentally. We've gotten less healthy physically. We've gotten less healthy spiritually. And there are very simple, fundamental things that we can do. The first thing is that science should be evidence-based. We should use a scientific method. We should test hypotheses, and we should go from there. We don't have to assume certain sciences are settled, like, for example, men in women's sports. That's another one of those ideas that Trump has backed Democrats into supporting, which is just, it's so stupid, and history will, we'll all agree that it was stupid over time, but he's tricked all these Democrats to going all in on it. We need to move around more. We need to start having foods with fresher ingredients, with fewer ingredients, with less processed food. And we need to start making it a religious endeavor to exercise, to move around, and to not take some of these social toxins that have replaced a lot of what used to be family time, spiritual time, exercise time, is now sitting on our phone and getting social contagion, consuming it nonstop. We're going to start addressing this stuff with the MAHA movement. And I'll tell you, as someone who was so excited about Robert Kennedy's announcement and nomination and confirmation, what I love about this guy is that he challenges everything that the status quo, the people who've been in power for so long and have let us down, everything that they believe is a fundamental. He wants to question it, and he wants to bring that to You got to back it up with evidence, or we're going a different direction. That's what Trump's all about, shaking things up in that way. And that's why I'm so excited about the MAHA movement in particular. All right, ladies and gentlemen, fan favorite here. Mike Benz is here from the Foundation for Freedom Online, and probably one of the most prolific online journalists working today in new media. Mike, I got a couple things I want to get to with you, but the first one is I want to watch you cook Harvard for a little bit. Go for it.
Well, Harvard is not what it seems. I always say this. Harvard, everyone thinks of it as a university. It has very little to do with the university. Structurally, it's a corporation. The Harvard Corporation, which is a 12-person board, runs the Harvard University. The Harvard Corporation now is run by Penny Pritzker. It's the Pritzker family who brought the Barack Obama into political relevance in Chicago. Obviously, J.B. Pritzker is the governor of Illinois to this day. Penny Pritzker was the Commerce Secretary for the Obama administration. She was the special envoy for the reconstruction of Ukraine. She's worth about $4 billion. She was the chair of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is one of the oldest think tanks in the country and was a frequent cover for CIA funding and CIA outreach work during the Cold War. Documents as early as 1951 show the Central Intelligence Agency planning things in tandem with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In fact, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace was run from 2014 to 2021 by Bill Burns. And Bill Burns only left the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which had been previously chaired by Penny Pritzker, to run the Central Intelligence Agency. And Harvard, what they do through all of their different centers, whether it's the Kennedy Center, the Shorenstein Center, the Berkman-Klein Center, the Belfer Center, they focus on areas of geopolitical conflict and policy that affect the multinational corporations that donate into Harvard and that Harvard, the Harvard Endowment, the $53 billion Harvard Endowment invests in. So one of the most shocking examples that has been publicly declassified because of the U.S. government role in it and the scandals that resulted was how Harvard made billions of dollars looting the economy of Russia during what should have been the period of peace that would have unified the U.S. with Eurasia diplomatically, when all of the trillions of state-held assets of the entire Soviet empire converted to capitalism and went through shock therapy. Harvard teamed up with the U.S. government. USAID at that time paid $500 million to Harvard's USAID. It was called the Harvard Institute for International Development. And using Harvard economists and Harvard's international relations specialists and Harvard's practitioners of statecraft, under effectively academic cover, the U.S. State Department and USAID worked with Russian oligarchs in control of the oil and gas sector, in control of the steel sector, in control of all of the different sectors that previously held that wealth publicly. They worked directly with Harvard and then gave the Harvard Endowment, together with George Soros's Quantum Fund, because Soros and Harvard worked together, special private inside access to bid on all of those assets. So they got to buy up, they got a first bite at the apple to buy up on the cheap all of these new assets that were previously held publicly for foreign populations. They did the same thing all over Central and Eastern Europe. And guess what? That was the same policy that the CIA and the State Department had, to take this wealth effectively, and that would increase U.S. national interest because it's being held now by Westerners rather than by foreigners. And you can see the logic of it. But the fact is this revolving door has put Harvard completely at odds with the Trump administration's foreign policy, their foreign policy on Russia, their foreign policy on Ukraine, their foreign policy on liberal interventionism writ large. And so you have this kind of economic hitman role that Harvard has played, and every system in that supports it. The Belfer Center, for example, at Harvard, which hosts not just Samantha Power, she's there now, the USAID administrator, who completely weaponized every aspect of that agency against half of the U.S. population through funding censorship initiatives, through funding initiatives that targeted Breitbart. It was USAID went after the advertisers and had whole primers on it. The Belfer Center was deeply involved with that inside of Harvard as well, where Samantha Power now is. The Belfer Center was actually teamed up with the Department of Homeland Security. They had a formal partnership with the Department of Homeland Security. The Belfer Center actually hosted DHS CISA events to censor the internet. Harvard coached the Department of Homeland Security ahead of the 2020 election, where they targeted 20 million Trump tweets and Trump supporter tweets as mis and disinformation, and then worked to get a huge proportion of them censored at the narrative level. The Belfer Center, and I have all this clipped, it's all on my X account if you just type in Belfer Center as a phrase, they coach them about how to set up, quote, incident response teams. And they actually put Breitbart in the repeat misinformation spreaders and went after domestic media voices through the Department of Homeland Security set up to stop another 9/11. But that was done because the U.S. government is banned by the First Amendment from doing it. So they reach into their partner network, and they reached into Harvard to do that. And Harvard also specializes in organizing riots and street protest movements. They call this nonviolent action, or the term folks may have heard a lot, the term color revolution, named after things like the Velvet Revolution, the Orange Revolution, the Green Revolution, these sorts of things. The end stage of that is a street protest that removes the government from power by destabilizing it and making the police and law enforcement and military helpless against the throngs of hordes in the streets. And Harvard has an entire center on nonviolent action in order to organize those things. Well, what is Erica Chenoweth, for example, and Maria Stephan from the Belfer Center doing now? They're organizing the Tesla takedown protests, the street protests that effectively wedged Elon Musk, I think in certain respects, off of aspects of the White House by effectively doing domestic terrorism against a private car company simply to try to drive down its stock price. And so this is the sort of stuff that the Belfer Center was doing in Yugoslavia and in Ukraine ahead of the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic and the Maidan Revolution. And so we funded this network. We've trained this network with a very special set of dark arts skills. And they are now using it against our own people and our own government, getting $9 billion worth of federal funding in the process.
Mike, this is essentially the question I want to ask. The history of Harvard is that it was founded by Americans, for Americans, to educate Americans so we would compete with and eventually surpass the elite universities overseas. Now, this is something that is used to empower foreign governments, to give our intellectual know-how to foreign leaders, to clandestinely educate Xi Jinping's daughter, not tell anyone about it until a decade later, and let her take whatever she's learning back to the CCP. All of this stuff feels fundamentally against the original vision for Harvard, and certainly against anything we would want to spend $9 billion on. Where is the disconnect here between the Democrats and anyone who is defending this behavior and where we're at here in Trump's America?
Well, the issue is that Harvard is, as it is a corporation, and it exists effectively within the community of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As the business community moved to profit from China because of the export markets, because of the supply chains, because of the manufacturing and labor, Harvard began to bet on China. Harvard began to bet on a world order that did not put the United States first. And so I think you see this reflected in much of the Democrat Party. You had the Biden first family directly profiting off of deals with China. Hunter Biden famously made $10 million through CEFC China Energy. Hunter Biden was brokering the sales of LNG ports in Louisiana to China. You have huge portions of the diplomatic class who have these partnerships with China. You have huge portions of the California power base. Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, as China effectively offers California a lifeline and is doing development deals. And so you have this skating towards where the puck is going. And the problem is that puts the United States in a death spiral because they're not actually advancing U.S. interests as they do it. And part of that is, I think the U.S. State Department, as well as the Central Intelligence Agency and aspects of our Defense Department, have moved into this as well as the contractors have seen the markets in China and have seen the markets in other hostile foreign nation states. I think this is a lot of what was behind the Iran deal, this move to open up the oil and gas. And Trump put a ban on that during his administration. But then 2 months into the Biden administration, China bought, in March 2021, China signed a $400 billion deal with Iran to buy their oil and gas. I think this is also what's giving rise, in part, to some aspects of the Israel-Palestine conflict on college campuses, is that Bill Burns, the CIA director for Joe Biden, personally negotiated the Iran deal. And the whole network is involved in that, and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
Mike, this is extraordinary. Hold that thought. I want to cut in with some breaking news. Federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from revoking Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students. This is a district judge, Allison D. Burroughs. I will tell you guys, I have run this case by Harvard-educated attorneys, and they're very optimistic Trump is going to win the long game on this one, that he's righteous here. And if Harvard challenges it, they might be able to pick off one rogue judge. But this is looking good, so we will keep you posted on that as that develops. It'll probably be weeks on that. We are back here with Mike Benz. He's at Mike Benz Cyber on Twitter, the Foundation for Freedom Online, foundationforfreedomonline.com for the website. You guys all know Mike and appreciate his work. Mike, I know we can hang on Harvard the rest of the time, but I want to get your thoughts on low-hanging fruit cuts that you want to see, because we were talking about this is a Republican budget, a Republican spending bill. Conservatives are ostensibly in charge here. What are the cuts that you want Washington to be focused on right now as they work through Trump's big, beautiful bill?
For the life of me, I cannot understand how the National Endowment for Democracy continues to be funded by the Trump administration. This is completely outrageous to me. There were many gestures early in the Trump admin that funding would be cut to this organization. I believe J.D. Vance even got in a spat with them on X, saying, "Well, if you're doing anything useful, why is the cover photo on your X account and your webpage a picture of the Cold War? The Cold War's been over for 30 years." But the fact is the National Endowment for Democracy has taken its CIA origins. It was literally conceived of in the office of William Casey, the CIA director, in 1983. Its founders told the New York Times publicly that it was created because it was terrible. The direct quote is, it was terrible when groups in the 1960s were seen as being subsidized by the Central Intelligence Agency. That's why the endowment was created. So both the CIA and the founders itself openly concede that its role is to be an NGO version of the Central Intelligence Agency, and that played a very useful role in the Cold War in the 1980s in toppling foreign governments that had autocratic features and were left-wing communist, socialist in nature, and helped open up them to capitalism and to Western liberalism and all the rest. It was, in fact, they were so effective that the New York Times in the early 1990s said that we don't even need to confirm, I think it was Bob Gates, as the CIA director, because we don't need the CIA anymore. We have the National Endowment for Democracy. But they have pivoted completely from countering left-wing communism to countering right-wing populism, and we have a populist president here. The National Endowment for Democracy bragged about censoring Trump voices, had entire operations to stop Trump from the inside. And the fact that they remain what appears to be almost fully funded is like voluntarily giving your own government cancer. And I can't for the life of me, other than donor pressure or a need to appease Congress in order to get other parts of the bill passed, understand why this administration would continue to fund that.
Absolutely brilliant. Mike Benz, check him out online at Mike Benz Cyber on Twitter, Foundation for Freedom Online.com. You guys all know Mike's stuff, and he's an invaluable part of this movement. Charlie's team deserves a big thank you. Dalen, Shane, Parker, Frank, Riley, Blake, Ryan, Mr. D, Daisy, and of course, the great producer, Andrew. You guys are the best. I absolutely love filling in for my friend Charlie Kirk. If you've liked what you heard today, there's a lot of places to find me online. Editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, our Breitbart Fight Club, which is for our premium members. I'm interviewing Peter Schweitzer today. The Alex Marlow Show, wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Rumble, whoever's your favorite, give me a subscribe. I really appreciate that a lot. Got a lot of books for you. Breaking Biden, very relevant. My last book that I've spoken to Charlie about many times. But honestly, Charlie is the absolute best. And it is a privilege to work with his terrific team that puts together such a great show. It's an incredible country, and we love fighting for it each and every day on the Charlie Kirk Show and the Alex Marlow Show and all throughout Salem. Thanks, everyone. I'll talk to you next time. All right, let's talk about gold for a second. You guys have seen what's happening this year. It's up over 25%. It broke past 3,300. It's at 3,250 right now. And I think it's going to go up from here. You guys are seeing the stock market so chaotic, losing trillions, bouncing around wildly. The one thing that's been so dependent each and every day has been gold. New tariffs are going to continue to shake up trade. Inflation's running hot. Our national debt now over $36 trillion. And the big, beautiful bill, I got to say, it's probably going to add to it, unfortunately. I hope not, but Goldman says that gold could hit 3,700 before the year's out. Central banks are buying gold at record levels, and my friends at Priority Gold have a free gold guide for all of you. They'll help you purchase gold yourself. You'll learn a lot about it. They will teach you all about the industry. I think it's really cool to learn about, to fill yourself in on what your options are. You can move into a gold or precious metals IRA or 401k, tax and penalty free. It's just terrific. And I think that it was the biggest no-brainer. If you'd bought gold when I started recommending it, you'd have made a ton of money by now. Here's what you do. Text SNC, as in Salem News Channel. Text SNC to 24999. That's the whole number. You don't need 10 digits. 24999, text SNC. Get your 2025 gold guide right now, or you can go to prioritygold.com/freedom. It's another option for you. These are great people with a great product or several great products. Check it out. SNC to 24999, prioritygold.com/freedom. All right. Got a new guest on the show for you today. May Mailman is here. She's Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Policy Strategist for the White House. May, it's really nice to meet you. We're going to get into all the legal stuff, particularly with Harvard. But first of all, since you're new, I'd love to invite you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me. So my name is May, and I was a day one to the last day staffer for Trump 1.0.
Nice.
And so I'm very elderly in Trump years, and during the second time came on during the transition and stayed here. And my role is I'm Stephen Miller's deputy on his deputy chief of staff role. So Stephen has his Homeland Security stuff, which is just purely border security, immigration, that sort of thing. But then also as deputy chief of staff for policy, we present a lot of the policies to the president, help organize the White House, make sure that the executive orders are in line with the president's vision, move policies through the White House. And that's something that I did during the first time. It's something that Stephen and I are doing this time, and there's never a dull day.
Yeah, I believe it. And Stephen likes to move fast, which is the number one best quality, I think, for someone in the executive branch, is it not wasting time. I think that's number one. So he's got that, among other gifts. I've known Stephen for about 20 years, so it's kind of a wild thing because neither of us are very old. So it's a funny world we live in sometimes. So May, you're a Harvard trained lawyer. And so when this executive order came down, I want to get your reaction to it, and then I want to get sort of the legal argument for it, because we've got some Harvard lawyers on our staff at Breitbart, and I ran the executive order by them, and they like it. They think it's strong. So tell me just at a personal level what that's like. You were there. So what was it like there? And then tell me about the order itself.
Yeah, so Harvard, when I was there, was pretty good the first 2 years. This was 2012 and 2013, the first 2 years, where it's obviously a liberal place, but because it's such a big place, there's also a lot of conservatives. It's like living in California, right? California has the most number of Republicans of any state. Even though it's a very liberal state, you're never alone. There's always going to be a sort of conservative presence there.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about Harvard. The last year was a little bit different. This was the hands up, don't shoot, Michael Ferguson situation.
Sure.
There were a lot of die-ins and that sort of thing. So it was very protesty. And you did feel constrained in what you could say or do, but it's still, and the students were saying we don't want to take exams, and Kayleigh McEnany was the year below me, and she went on Bill O'Reilly at the time and said, no, I think you should take exams, and that was like a huge ordeal. So it was almost like cute, the level of discord at the time compared to now. So we just hired somebody who's graduating from Harvard Law School next week. He hasn't even graduated yet. And the culture there, and I haven't spent that much time on college campuses, but the culture there is tremendously different, as it is across the country, where anti-Semitism is brought on not just by a lot of the international students, but random people on campus that are not students. This is very organized, and the racial hierarchy that these universities are blessing is what's creating the anti-Semitism, right? The anti-Semitism is who's more white, who's less white, who's more oppressed, who's less oppressed. And so it's disgusting, and that wasn't really there when I was at Harvard.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point. I've been becoming more and more obsessed with this idea that universities are ruining cities and cities are ruining universities. Because I went to Berkeley, and when I was there, it was really the local left-wing agitators that would kind of amp up the students. And the students would go along with it. So they're not free from blame here. But it was a lot of the biggest protesters and protests were coming from the people who were there. And I do think a lot of universities create this sort of economic structure for leftism to thrive. And it really is something that we need to spend a lot of time on that down the road. But the topic du jour today is Trump administration blocking international students from going to Harvard. I love it, to be frank, but I want to hear, first of all, the rationale, and then the legal justification for it is really important to get to. But let's get the rationale first.
Yeah, so Harvard, like a lot of universities, has a partnership with the federal government where they're part of the student visa program, in which they are allowed to have student visa holders hosted at these universities, and in exchange, they provide information and are basically a partner with the federal government, so the federal government can do appropriate vetting, can ensure that visa holders leave when their degrees are finalized, various things like that. Even, you need contact with the embassy, these sorts of things. It's a relationship, it's information, it's coordination, and it's run through a program called the SEVIS program for various types of visas. So what the Trump administration did was, a few weeks ago, we asked Harvard to send us some basic information about their student visa holders. Hey, can you give us information about their discipline status? Are you aware of any off-campus behavior? Just, tell us about your students, give us all this information. And Harvard's response was basically like, we won't. I mean, here is such a minute amount of information that's basically known and irrelevant, and we're not going to give you anything else. And that's not a relationship. That's not a partnership. That's not what the SEVIS program was designed to do. The student visa program is meant for students to come to the U.S., learn, and then actually leave and take those American values and spread them around the world. So it actually is supposed to be like a values learning exchange program. So questions we have about values and about their activity are super relevant here. And if Harvard's not going to provide full information, then they have decided, it's their choice, that they don't actually want to be a partner. They don't want to be part of this program. And so really, Harvard still has an opportunity. If you read Kristi Noem's letter to Harvard saying, hey, we're going to end this program, it still says, if you want to be part of this program, we're going to ask you one more time, can you give us this basic information? So people are freaking out. I mean, there's already been a court complaint filed. There's already been a TRO that's been given.
Yes.
The letter says, if you'd like to participate in this program, please answer some questions. That's hardly a threat. That is just, this is a relationship. Will you be part of that relationship?
Yeah, really interesting. And I feel like there's the whole premise that I feel like is getting lost here is that why should American universities, why shouldn't they be, especially when they're getting taxpayer dollars, but even if they aren't, why are they existing just to undermine the country and to educate foreign leaders? And like, why shouldn't they? I mean, Xi Jinping's daughter famously went to Harvard, but it's only famous because they covered it up. Like, she was under a pseudonym and we didn't know she was there. And then we learned after the fact that she was there. And it just, why is that our role? And why is it automatic? Why shouldn't there be, if you're going to do that, shouldn't you at least be able to cooperate with some basic stuff like what you guys are asking?
Yeah, and these universities, they're not using the student visa program like it was designed, which is it's almost for a foreign exchange program for high school students. You have a host family, and the host family teaches you what it's like to be in the U.S. so that when you go, you have those skills, you have those values, you've learned something valuable, and then you leave. That's not what's happening here. Harvard and a lot of other universities are using international students as moneymakers. This is part of their financial model. Harvard is 1/3 international students. And so not only at some point is this no longer about teaching people about America and it's just about making money, but at some level of people, you actually lose the American value, right? You lose the thing that they were supposed to be there to learn because there's such a massive number of people on the other side. So that type of behavior by universities shows that we've lost the purpose of the student visa program, which doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. And there's nothing that's been indicated by DHS that the student visa program is being shut down. But basically, the students you still have your visa, you just have to use it at a different university. And I'm sure there are several universities that'd be willing to have these people. But for any student who spent any time on campus and you ask, who is leading the violence? Who is there out there committing acts of violence, harassment, and to some degrees terrorism against Jewish students and against white students? And the answer is it's international students in coordination with well-funded bodies.
Right. So, okay. So I want to be very specific here. It's what is the request of Harvard? What is the order literally? I think those are really important. I know we're reiterating a little bit, but I just want to be crystal clear with people what's going on so that they're not getting, 30,000 foot from non-attorneys. Tell me exactly what's going on.
Yeah, so there is no executive order. This is purely coming out of the Department of Homeland Security, and this is a request for information. The most recent is probably like 6 or 7 questions to Harvard saying, 1, can we have all information, including video information if you have it, student records about the student visa holders' behavior on campus? 2, what information do you have about these students' behavior off campus, potentially criminal, potentially harassing behavior off campus? All it is questions directly related to student visa holders that the university either has or doesn't have. And Harvard has a phone. Harvard has the internet. They can send an email. They can pick up the phone. They can get clarification. But instead, they've decided to fight this. But this is not a presidential order.
Sure.
This is a Department of Homeland Security information request.
Okay, so and thank you for the correction, non-executive order. Very important to make that distinction. So I feel like you guys are legally righteous here. I got coached up a little bit before the broadcast with some of the lawyers I've got on staff, including at least one Harvard-trained lawyer. But there's been a TRO. It's already been put in place. This could have been expected, almost automatic. So it'll be a longer legal fight. But I feel like you guys feel like you're on good ground. What gives you the confidence?
Yeah, so the ruling, and I think with TROs, you never know actually what the judge is thinking or what their merits position is. It's basically just freezing something in place while the judge has a time to look through the merits. But if you look at Harvard's complaint, they throw in everything. I mean, all their grievances. Like, look, they're picking on us. So they're trying to basically say we're the victims here, which is just so outrageous to me because the aggrieved nature of Harvard University is something that only a district judge in Massachusetts could appreciate and basically no other human being. But they say that there's various procedures that need to go through, that they're being punished for the First Amendment and all sorts of things. But here's the thing. Harvard can do in a lot of ways whatever it wants.
Yes.
It's a private entity. Do whatever you want. But when it comes to your relationships with the federal government, like your quote unquote entitlement to federal funds or your entitlement to student visas, those come with strings. It's a contract. We give this to you under certain terms. And so federal funding comes with certain terms. Don't discriminate. That's pretty basic. Title VI, don't discriminate. And then student visa, it comes to you with certain terms. Information sharing. And so that's the thing. Harvard is free to have the First Amendment. It is free to be as leftist as it wants, but it's not free to do it on the taxpayer's dime when that leftism means #resistance in discrimination and lack of information sharing.
One of the things that is really striking to me is how it calls out China specifically. I think I've been talking to my audience about this since January, that I think a lot of what Trump is doing is to parry China on the global stage, but he's not saying it explicitly, which I think is terrific strategy. I don't think that China will take kindly to that if he's too overt in that ambition. But this one, the letter says Harvard researchers collaborated with China-based academics on projects funded by an Iranian government agent and partnered with Chinese universities tied to military advancements, including aerospace and optics research using the U.S. Department of Defense funds. Harvard partnered with individuals linked to China's defense industrial base, including conducting robotics research with military applications. I hope people read this letter, because I mean that is going to be news to the vast majority of Americans.
Yeah, and so I think this is what we mean when we say we need information, because it's not supposed to pick on China, but every student from every country, there comes with it a need for understanding, for vetting, and that doesn't end at the door, right? Okay, now you're in, have a good life.
Right.
It is a constant process. And so this letter shows that there have been examples where people, once they're here, those linkages become clear, maybe loyalties become clear, partnerships become clear. And so so of course, the federal government needs to trust the information that is coming out of the organization that's essentially sponsoring this student. And if Harvard's basic reaction is get lost, then there isn't that trust in the system. And so it sort of breaks the entire idea of the student visa program. So yeah, China definitely has been a huge part of the narrative here. And 10% of the student body at Harvard is international students from China. But that's not the basis. It really is everyone from everywhere, whether you're from the Middle East, whether you're from Canada, there needs to be some information that's provided to the federal government.
Makes perfect sense, and I'm got high hopes for this one. And I think it's another one where I think the vast majority of normal Americans are beginning to have disdain for Harvard. I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing. I've got a lot of family members who went to Harvard and friends, and so I don't personally have any feeling one way or the other. I'm just saying that Harvard in its current iteration is incredibly unpopular, I think, with the public. And I think Trump identifying these issues and going after them always seems to work out well, because he puts the left in this position where they're defending things that are just completely unpopular. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out, both politically and legally. And I think it seems like a brilliant idea. So good work on it. May, while we have the time, I want to talk about a couple other ones. The ACGME, which is the body that accredits medical residency programs, is stopping enforcement of a DEI requirement that it's had. This is another victory, I think, especially on a cultural level. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so we signed an executive order about a month ago that said that the Department of Education is going to take aim at accreditors. And these accreditors are bodies that are supposed to make sure that your law school isn't funneling money to weird places, that your law school is actually teaching you basic things about the law, so that when you graduate from an accredited law school, that people can say, this person was taught basic stuff. They probably know about the Constitution. So same thing with medical schools, et cetera. Except except for that, the accreditors has decided to go completely woke. And instead of actually saying you need to learn constitutional law, or in medical school, you probably should take a course on nutrition, things like that, the accreditors have said that for the body to be accredited, they need to implement diversity requirements, right? They need to show how their commitment to equity. It caused a lot of race-based admissions, and if people are graduating from medical school and the elite residency programs are only letting in people of the wrong race, then this body would come in and say, I'm not accrediting your residency program. And as a patient, what you want is to make sure that every single one of your doctors is there for the right reasons and not for their skin color. So after our executive order, and we think that this is really big news, the medical residency program, as you mentioned, it still has it on its website, but if you look at its news and you see the last minutes of the board meeting, they all decided that they're no longer enforcing the diversity requirement, which is huge. That means that from now on, these residency programs can let people based on merit into their program, and our whole nation is safer. And who benefits? Minorities, right? Because there's not a single person who wants a doctor who's going to treat them poorly. So rich people, poor people, white people, black people, doesn't matter. We're all benefited when you've got medical residency programs based on merit.
You know, there's something else here which is important, is that it benefits the programs, because these things are so hard. My wife just finished her medical fellowship, and it is, even on the smartest, most hardworking people, it is so hard to get your full slate of credentials to be a practicing doctor in this country. And it's got to be a massive headache if they get someone in the program who's not there on merit. I mean, that is going to hurt patients. It's going to hurt the program. It's going to have downstream consequences. It's so outrageous this was even in place to begin with, now that I'm thinking about it. But good for you guys for getting rid of it, and the whole country benefits. That is great news. One other one I want to highlight while we've got the time, the one big beautiful bill is ending funding for illegal immigrants, the work requirements for stuff like Medicaid. There's a lot of cultural wins that are here that I wanted to get you to opine on. I will opine. I don't like putting one in front of big beautiful bill. I just wanted to, I think you should do the straight ripoff. Build Back Better was BBB. We got the new BBB. Big beautiful bill. That's good enough for me. But you know what? He's a better marketer and brander than I am, but that's my take on it. But speak to me about some of these cultural wins from your vantage point as someone who's working on it.
Yeah, so I'll just take a couple of them. But on Medicaid, Biden forced Medicaid to pay for so-called transition services. Obviously, there's no such thing as transitioning your sex. You are the sex that you are. But now, at least, that is no longer going to be funded by Medicaid. And of course, we, the Trump administration, are going after it a little bit further. And we have executive orders saying that we're not going to fund any hospital that provides that type of service. Clinton-era work requirements. These people are acting like this is controversial, but of course, it's not. This is 20 hours a week. And it can even be like volunteering. So these are very basic but very necessary work requirements, because once you start working, then you're much more likely to become off Medicaid. This is for able-bodied adults. And then also a lot of program integrity requirements. So a lot of the reasons that our welfare programs are ballooning, which California is learning. I mean, they're going to have a $12 billion deficit because they keep giving Medicare to illegal aliens. But we have basic program integrity requirements to say that illegal aliens that should not be on welfare programs are not going to be. So I think these are the types of cultural wins that either the big beautiful bill or the one big beautiful bill, whatever you want to call it, that's fine.
I think I lost on this one. I think it's settled. I think we're using one now.
Yeah, but these are huge wins, and so we look forward to the Senate passing it.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Medicaid in particular, because I just want crystal clear clarity on this, because I love the idea of cutting the waste and getting the people who should not be on it off of it. But for the people who really deserve it, there's a lot of these people in rural America who would qualify even if scrutinized, and they're concerned they're going to lose their care. I've been talking to some of them. Speak to that group of people that if you're qualified, do they have anything to worry about?
No. I mean, if you can show documentation, come to your appointment and say, this is something that I qualify for, then this is going to be better for you, because part of the problem when people who are able-bodied and should be working but use money from the system anyway, people who are here illegally, when they take from the system, then there's no money left and it becomes an unpopular program and it becomes unsustainable to keep year to year. So the only way to sustain this program for the people who qualify is to have these basic program integrity checks. And so this is something that's going to benefit the truly needy.
Very cool. May Mailman, great to meet you. I want to plug anything for you. I'm seeing your Twitter at May Mailman, spelled Malman. Anything else I can get so people can follow you online?
No, Twitter is great. And
we call it X now, the everything app. I make that mistake sometimes.
Okay. Yeah. When you're a government employee, your Twitter becomes kind of boring because, the president speaks for all of us and he does a pretty good job.
He does a really good job. He speaks for a lot of people, even beyond his offices. All right. Well, it's great to meet you and thanks for all the information and best of luck with the Harvard stuff, because we're really rooting that on in the Marlow audience. I'll tell you that.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.